good morning, afternoon, or evening, and welcome to the Bloody Disgusting Network. The following show is just horrifying. Beware.
Welcome back to Horror Queers. We're talking horror anthologies, we're talking Canadian as fuck, and we're talking contemporary Halloween icon, Sam. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace, and we're talking Killing Children the movie.
Oh my god, so many child deaths. I'm in love.
So many kids. And I've seen this movie. Oh, sorry everyone. We're talking Michael Dougherty's Trick or Treat, the classic 2007, kind of, maybe 2009 film. We'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah, I've seen this movie at least, 10 times. And I always forget that, the majority of deaths are children in this movie.
It's true. And the movie gets away with it because it doesn't actually show you anything. All of the deaths happen off screen. But still, child murder, Trace. Child murder.
Yeah, but you know what, though? Even though it happens off screen, well, minus the jack-o'-lantern smasher, we see quite a bit of him. But, yeah, I don't know. It's a lot more playful than I remember it being playful, but despite its R rating and its penchant for killing children, it still managed to be, kind of a fun and frivolous little movie.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's one of the reasons why this movie is a classic.
Oh, 12 years after it comes out, it's a classic. And I feel like a lot of people would normally, raise their nose at that. But not so with this movie. I think this is pretty much universally beloved. It's not even a cult classic. It's a classic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, honestly, the only thing that prevented it from being more of a classic is if it had gone to fucking theaters.
Amen to that. But before we get too much deeper into this discussion, I do want to bring in our guest, because I'm sure she has a lot to say about the matter as well. All right, everyone, so you may have seen her work at such places like Slash Film, Birth Movies Death, Fangoria, and Collider. She is a co-host of the Black Magic Coven podcast, which discusses the supernatural, paranormal ghost stories, cryptids, killers, and haunted forbidden places. Oh, and she's also one of my coworkers at my day job. Please welcome Marisa Mirabal.
Hey guys, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming to talk Trick or Treat.
I'm so excited.
How are you doing, Marisa? Are you staying sane?
You know, as much as possible, I suppose, but we all go a little mad sometimes, especially during COVID, so...
I feel like that's a question that people just don't even know how to answer anymore. It's like when you haven't seen someone for a really long time and you say, so how have you been? And everybody's just I don't know. We're all just going through this.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, Tracy mentioned that we work together at the Chronicle, but, we chat pretty much every day, but I haven't seen you in 8 months.
It's actually kind of bizarre. So you two are probably the two people that I talk to the most, on a daily basis that, I'm not, forced to talk to, It's we're, natural friends. So this is really kind of an interesting experience for me, having you both on this podcast.
Worlds colliding.
Exactly.
That's really what it is.
I'm excited, though. I love this movie.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So, I obviously sent you a list of potential films to cover, and you really gravitated towards this one. Why is that, Marisa?
I just think it's a fantastic little horror film, and it didn't get as much love and recognition as it deserved. I think it was a little bit ahead of its time, and... the whole distribution situation was a little bit strange how it went straight to DVD, and I just really love it. I think it encapsulates the holiday itself, Halloween, in so many different areas over one's life. And it's just such a great anthology, special effects, fun acting, great score. There's just so many great components about it. It's so fun. It never gets old to watch.
I do wonder if that, because I have a bit of information on what the issues with the release trouble, but at the end of the day, no one really knows for certain why this movie was delayed for 2 years. There's a lot of speculation, but there's not a lot of definitive answers, and I'm a little surprised that Warner Brothers never kind of copped to it. But I do wonder, though, if the fact that it was an anthology, contributed to that a bit, even though and we'll talk about this more in a bit, but like it really is a seamless film in terms of like the division of the stories, where it doesn't really feel like, oh, one story ends, another one begins. One story ends, another one begins. Like it feels very innovative for the anthology format, you know?
Right,
Yeah.
and I think that's one reason I really love it so much, because I'm honestly not a big fan of anthologies. I do like, Creep Show, but it is very segmented to me.
Mhm.
The way that this seamlessly, you have one character that's within each part of the storyline. It's very intricately and meticulously woven together to complete a narrative in a really smart way, while also having independent subplots, or sublines. The way that it flows really well, like you were saying, it comes together so smoothly and so nicely that it seems like a complete film, and it's not just broken up and choppy.
Right.
Which I feel bad for the editor almost, because editing this would probably be really stressful because of how they all interact and how so many scenes are kind of like implied,
Mhm. Well, I think too, like modern examples of like horror anthologies. I mean, you have your VHS trilogy, you have Southbound, and I haven't seen it yet, but I'm pretty sure both of y'all have like the Mortuary Collection, right?
Yeah, that's a good one that's kind of similar to this style.
Yeah, but even that one, I would argue it still uses a barely conventional framing device. Like the way it dips in and out of the stories is similar to this, but once we go into a story, we don't stop. Like we're not intercutting with other stories at the same time. And I do think that that's what's innovative about Trick or Treat.
I agree, because you forget how many times, I mean, I'll use one example, but like how many times we cut back to the Anna Paquin story constantly throughout the majority of this film. And granted, this movie's 78 minutes without credits. It's not like a lengthy film, but it feels full still, and it breezes by.
Oh, yeah.
Well, okay, so let's go into kind of how this film got made. And again, I don't have a ton of information, but we'll go with what I have. So, Little Demon Sam, who is, of course, the physical manifestation of the... Do we want to call it a holiday? Samhain?
Yeah, I mean, celebration, holiday, festival,
I will tell you that I honestly didn't know it was pronounced Samhain until I saw this movie, a decade ago, because I always go to Halloween 2, the original, when Donald Pleasance is like, Sam Hain.
It has a very deceptive spelling, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I had read it was from like the translation of Celtic, like the writing or like the alphabet was slightly different or something.
Right. Well, that would make sense because this is based on Gaelic and Celtic histories. Yeah.
I know we're going to be second guessing ourselves so much in this. But no, I think you're right, Joe. Now, Sam himself, he got his start in a short film that was written and directed by Michael Dougherty in 1996 called Season's Greetings. And this actually was included on the Blu-ray. Did either of y'all watch this?
I've seen it before, but I didn't watch it before this.
Okay.
I did. I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, it's all right. I mean, it's kind of like a rough animation style. I mean, it's like 3 or 4 minutes long. It's like Sam walking around. He gets cornered in an alley by a thug, and we see Shad, like him getting beat up in like a silhouette.
I was surprised that it was actually animation, like freehand drawing.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it would be, in-person shooting, like a short. So I found that kind of interesting. It was like, reminded me a little bit of Vincent, Tim Burton's old school short that he did. But yeah, it's only like 3 or 4 minutes, but I mean, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, like the gotcha, because Joe and I have been doing a lot of shorts right now for our micro queer segments, and we've discussed how a lot of short films, like it's kind of like, oh, like we're building up to the end for this like gotcha moment, and the gotcha of this film is that basically Sam walks out of the alleyway with his bag of candy filled with the body of his abuser, and basically the camera zooms in on his face, and his eye kind of gets a glowy look, and he has an evil smile, and that's the end of it. So this movie just kind of was birthed off of that basic concept. But yeah, like despite having been portrayed as such in this film and a bunch of other works, Samhain is not, a deity or a personage of ancient Celtic polytheism. It's just the name of the celebration. So yeah, celebration is what we'll say instead of holiday, but that's fine. Sure. It's kind of evolved over the years.
Right.
Well, it's based in pagan tradition, right? Which I think is one of the I don't know. It's definitely one of the reasons why I love Halloween as a celebration / holiday. Because it's one of the few things that has actually survived not being co-opted by like a religious faction. It's actually almost staunchly anti-religious. So I kind of like the fact that we celebrate the end of a season and the transition into a new one, like so the end of the harvest and into the winter. But also this idea that there's a liminal divide between the thin veils that separate our world and the spirit world. I love all of the kind of mysticism of it and how it doesn't have ties to like Catholicism.
I actually really like that. Obviously, that makes total sense, but I've never even thought about that as being like, not even anti-religious, but like it just, no religions, like kind of co-opt this holiday for anything. And I just never really thought about that. Like, I mean, obviously corporations have co-opted it for a lot of things, but whatever.
Yeah, for sure. Including the image of Sam.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or people like maybe demonize it a little bit, like say that witchcraft or, that holiday is associated with Satan, like they could turn it negatively. But like you were saying, it goes back to a time that's not even really focusing on that at all. It's about the transitions of the seasons, and there's so many different components of it. Like that's one thing I love about Trick or Treat too, is that it tackles a lot of different aspects of these traditions and ideas for that festival. Like there's this sacrificial element, there's the trick-or-treating element, there's just the costume element, there's just so many different things that are around those traditions over the years with the history of that festival or Halloween in and of itself that it tackles, and I think it does it really well.
Well, and I think the key here too is that it respects the holiday, and I think that that's something that about this particular like celebration, holiday, whatever, that as I say whatever to like disrespect the holiday.
Sam will be coming after you.
Well, no, because like he's even reminding me of like Shudder's Host that came out earlier this year of how like, you have to respect the dead, otherwise bad shit happens to you.
Yeah.
And this feels like it's written and directed by a man who respects this celebration. And wants to celebrate it. And that's what I love about it. So this is Dougherty's first like feature directorial debut. He kind of got his start. And Joe, I don't know how we keep coming back to this.
I know, right?
Because we just did Urban Legends Final Cut with John Ottman, who is buddy with alleged pedophile, sexual abuser Bryan Singer.
Yep.
Well, little did we know that Michael Dougherty also got his start in Singer's umbrella. He co-wrote X2 X-Men United as well as Superman Returns, but to also connect back to our Urban Legends episode, he also co-wrote the direct-to-video sequel Urban Legends Bloody Mary.
Oh my gosh, I never saw that. That came out a couple years ago, right? That's not too old.
Oh, it's 2006. It's right, but it's the same. It's the same year as Superman Returns, actually.
Okay, never mind.
No, that could be last year. That could be a decade ago.
Yeah, I know. But it's time.
Well, it's Kate Mara in the lead pre-fame, so you can make of that what you will. But I do think that because Bryan Singer is an active producer on this film, and I think that's kind of how Dougherty was able to get Warner Brothers to do this film, and also get the cast that he has.
Right. Yeah, calling in some favors here.
Yeah, well, because Brian Cox was obviously in X-Men 2. I don't know if
Anna
Dylan...
Paquin? Or is she only in X-Men 1? No, she's
duh.
in 2, right?
She's in the first 3. No, you're right. Okay, I always forget that Anna Paquin was in the X-Men movies. I don't even know what to say to that.
It's because her rogue character is so sad. She plays the role well, but she is not given anything to do, and it's a very frustrating arc.
Yep, and granted, I haven't seen the rogue cut of Days of Future Past, but apparently she does have a lot more to do in that version.
Oh, yeah.
I think that obviously without Singer, this movie wouldn't have existed, which is kind of a shame. But, it is what it is.
Yep.
So, they filmed this movie. Now, it is supposed to be released October 5th, 2007, just in time for a Halloween release. Oh, this would be my freshman year of college. Jesus. So, anyway, Warner Brothers, without explanation or reason, pulled the film from the schedule, and no release date was announced. So, one possible reason that they would have pulled it, and this is what people think, is that Saw 4 was slated for release around the same time, and Warner Brothers didn't want to compete against it, because, again, bear in mind that like Saw 2 and 3 each went on to make like $80 million domestically and dominate the October period for the 2 previous years. Little did we know that, after 3, the box office numbers would steadily decline for that franchise.
Yeah, but it's still like a powerhouse, right? I mean, if you're looking at the release calendar and you're looking at the previous years, you're thinking this $12 million film that, sure, has famous people in it, but is from an untested director. not built on an established property, going up against arguably the juggernaut of the Halloween season, yeah, the little film is going to blink.
Which I think is really interesting, though, given where we are now. I mean, obviously pre-COVID, because remember, Saw, I think, was supposed to come out in October, but then they pushed it to May to avoid competition with Halloween Kills.
Yeah. Well, because they looked at the box office for Halloween, and then they looked at the box office for Jigsaw.
And I never thought about this, and I don't know how accurate this is either, but according to some IMDb trivia, another possible reason the film was buried by the studio was that it was possible fallout from the box office disappointment of Superman Returns, which was, again, co-written by Michael Dougherty and produced and directed by Bryan Singer. And his production company is the one that produced this. So I don't know if there was like a personal vendetta. I mean, if we're going to believe this line of like thinking there's like a personal vendetta, because I just don't see how the box office disappointment of Superman Returns is really going to affect the release and box office of this film, which is a completely different beast minus the creative people behind it.
Yeah, it seems very suspicious. Like, I wonder if there is some kind of weird rumor mill. Like, people were very confused in the wake of Superman Returns not doing well, and it generated its own kind of urban legends about what would happen to the people associated with that film. But I do want to ask you, Marisa, because I did not remember or know any of this until we started prepping for this episode. Do you remember seeing anything connecting this to Bryan Singer when it came out?
No. Looking back on this, I mean, it was just recent, like earlier today, I was like, oh, he is connected to it. I wasn't focusing on that. I hate getting caught up in that kind of stuff. It's disgusting and terrible, and I don't like contributing to it, and so it puts a damper on the film. But at the same time, you know, I don't want him to overshadow all the other people who put in a lot of amazing work into this film, you know, both in production and acting. There's more good seeds than bad on this film, so
for sure.
As lame as it is and awful as it is, you know, I was just trying to focus on all the people that
the good. You know, focus on the good.
Yeah, the good. So yes and no, a little bit.
It is weird though, right? Because if you think about it, like if this film had been released now, on the poster we would see like from the executive producer of Pupil or the X-Men franchise or something. And I feel like we just didn't see any of that, which is why I don't actually believe the Superman Returns penalty thing. That just seems
well, and honestly,
too
like
up there.
I'm not super involved with those franchises anyway. Like Trace knows.
Yeah, you don't do comics and superheroes.
I don't do like X-Men, Marvel so much. I still haven't seen Endgame. You know, like
you don't like them spandex? Okay.
No, I mean.
I had to like beg her to go see Birds of Prey.
Which I did love.
Oh, Marisa, that is such a you movie.
Oh, I did love Birds of Prey. I thoroughly enjoyed that, actually. So I was really glad I went to go see that. But yeah, I mean, typically that's not my cup of tea. So, you know, that's another reason why I wasn't super involved in that kind of news at the time, because I didn't have like a personal relationship with that fandom and wasn't keeping up with a lot of news coming from there. So I wasn't super familiar with him, but yeah, I mean, I am now.
I think what y'all are forgetting though is that because this didn't get that theatrical release, we weren't getting trailers for this. Because if we were, there would have been from the producer of X-Men, whatever, or I guess produced to you by the director of X-Men. But I mean, again, like, because there's two Blu-ray releases for this film. One is like the original release in 2009, and the other is the Scream Factory Blu-ray. I have the original, and Singer is all over the production featurette on this, which is like a 30-minute featurette.
Right, and that was made at the time, I'm assuming?
Yeah, this one was at the time. There's interviews with the cast like during filming. So it's also weird when you see a direct-to-DVD film get this kind of like behind-the-scenes treatment for something that they were just going to drop.
Yeah. So I have the old school one from like 2009.
Yeah.
And the special features are just the short and I think the director's commentary.
Wait, no, that's the one I have too.
Really?
So there are a couple extra scenes. There's a school bus VFX comparison, but there is one 30-minute featurette called How Did Many of Our Scary Season Traditions Start? And it's just about like how Halloween came to be.
Wait, so Trace, you don't have a Scream Factory?
Well, no, I don't have it because the thing is I looked and like there's like 2 or 3 extra bonus features in the Scream Factory one, and I think they used the same transfer. So it was one of those where I was like, that's not really worth the upgrade to me.
Yeah.
But this film actually does get its world premiere on December 9th, 2007. So again, 2 months after it was supposed to go to theaters at Harry Knowles' infamous Button-a-thon, which
oh
if y'all
my God.
I know.
Just enough.
Another dude not really worth mentioning. That's not that great.
I've never
I
attended a
know.
Button-a-thon, but listeners, if you don't know who that is, he's also a noted creep who used to run the website Ain't It Cool News.
Still does.
Well, yeah. I think this was his birthday celebration, though, where it was basically 24 hours of films. It was like half films that were like, old or like repertory screenings, and then half of like new films. And this was like one of those surprise new films of like, hey, like we don't know when this is coming out. We're going to show this.
Right.
It did a bunch of festivals over the years before finally Warner just released it straight to DVD on October 6th, 2009.
Yep. Basically dumped it.
I mean, yeah, that's exactly what they did. I mean, I don't think they knew the life it was going to have today.
No. Oh, no. They had no idea what they had.
But yeah, so I have no box office information to give you. Joe, you were right. The budget was $12 million, which again, for something like this, seems like a lot of money.
Yeah. When you watch it, it looks like they're using their $12 million fairly well. Like, as Marissa said, we've got some big names, but also the FX work looks pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm shocked because this is a film that you could easily see having janky CGI in it.
Yeah.
Like, this is the time that would have been rife for bad CGI.
Mm-hmm.
And this film still looks really good.
Oh, when we get to the werewolf transformation scene, we'll have plenty to talk about
Oh,
with
so
practical
good.
effects.
So good.
But yeah, I mean, this movie's pretty universally beloved. It's got an 84% on Rotten Tomatoes with an average score of 7.42 out of 10 and a Letterboxd score of 7.2 out of 10. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a great movie. I love it. We all love it. And let's talk about what it's about.
Okay. So after a brief Halloween safety PSA, we open on costumed couple Henry, Tamo Pennicott, and Emma, Leslie Bibb, returning home.
Bibb!
Ah, the Bibbs.
Have we talked about her recently on something? Maybe it was The Babysitter. I don't know. She is an actress that I just feel like has never gotten her due, and I think she's so funny all the time.
Except in this, where she's just a straight up bitch.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I feel bad because if people are coming into this and have never experienced her before, this is not a good representation of what she's like in all of her other roles. Except maybe Popular. She's a bit of a bitch in Popular.
Yeah, well, because when was Popular, like the early 2000s?
Like mid. It would have been like a couple years before Glee.
Well, because basically here, she's the opening kill. She's like the Drew Barrymore. I mean, if we want to compare it to Scream at all, she's the, famous celebrity opening kill here. And I'm wondering if it's proximity to...
Celebrity kill.
Well,
nice try, Trace.
But I'm wondering if her proximity to... the film's proximity to Popular, like, had anything to do with that. Because the husband, oh god, Tamo something?
Pennicott.
I only knew him from Dollhouse at the time.
Oh my god, he's on Battlestar Galactica.
I've never seen Battlestar Galactica.
You should. You would fucking like it. It's actually really, really good.
No, I've heard that, but I've just never taken that deep dive.
Yeah,
There
of course
are
you're not.
some
Things in space.
shout outs and a lot of allusions to other horror films within Trick or
Oh,
Treat.
yeah.
So I think the opening scene, even though like she's not on par with Drew Barrymore, she doesn't carry the same weight necessarily. I think that scene is very reminiscent of Scream. There are rules, but there are not rules. Like, you have to follow certain rules, but we'll also kill children kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah, I think the use of tension is really good. It's like you get a taste of tension and comedy in there, which I think is really good appetizer for that film.
I think the editing in this scene is what works for me the most when she's constantly pulling the sheets off of the...
Yes.
What will we call these things? They're like ghost
scarecrows.
crucifixes? Okay.
Yeah.
Did you just say ghost crucifixes?
Yes!
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
That is my favorite new word. That's hilarious.
Well, now we know what the subtitle for this episode.
Ghost crucifixes. No, but it does play with your expectations a bit, right? Because,
Oh, for
again,
sure.
you keep thinking it's going to come from one of these ghost crucifixes,
Yes.
and then he just jumps out of the laundry basket.
Yes.
So you folks don't think that this is more of a homage to Halloween because Sam gets her under the sheet?
I think it could be. I think that's definitely a possibility. And, there was that guy across the street in the mask who's just staring at her in the beginning.
Mhm.
And then it's like, okay, that's the threat, right? That would typically be a threat. But then it it's like a red herring. It's not. Something else is going to happen. So I think that the Halloween references are definitely there too, which I loved that when I first saw that, because all of those, you know, situations are very nerve-wracking for me in general. Any like male just standing there staring at you is uncomfortable in any capacity, let alone in a mask. And then pulling sheets off of things. I mean, that's like that scene in Oculus. It's a trope, and it gets me every time. That tension, it just creeps me out. It usually is always something to just mess with you, but it's still uncomfortable.
Still effective.
Yeah, it still works on me.
And slight side note too about them as characters. We don't really get anything more from them after this scene, except like the brief appearances they have later in the film. But they don't even like really get any dialogue. But I do love the sexual openness of this relationship,
where she's basically like, "Go masturbate, and I'll just come finish you off in a couple minutes."
I know, she's like lame to hang out with on Halloween, and even lamer to like go to bed with on Halloween too.
See, I got the impression that they were gonna watch the tape together, because she says, "Go start the tape," and so that's what I thought, that he was obviously gonna masturbate and stuff while she was cleaning up. Which, by the way, though, that would take forever to clean up that lawn.
Her rationale makes no sense to me. You're gonna clean up your yard in the dark? Like, she doesn't even turn on lights.
Right.
Emma, you're crazy.
Right. At the end of the night when you're wasted or lit, she actually uses the word lit,
she
which
says
is
lit.
really funny.
2007 lit.
I know. I was like, is this where it comes from? I don't know.
That's great.
So ridiculous.
They are the definition of boring white suburbia, though, right? Like, they go to a street parade, and then they come home lightly buzzed so that they can watch a horrible-looking porno and go to bed early.
Yes.
Life in the burbs.
So
funny.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So she is killed by getting her throat slit with a pumpkin-shaped sucker. And then when Henry comes down and discovers her body, we see the sucker has been jammed into her mouth. And that's when we get our animated credits.
I think that her face is probably the most disturbing image in the film for me. Like, her stretched lips or cheeks with the lollipop in it. Ooh, it is. It's really rough.
Well, and cutest weapon, you know, like the most adorable weapon, that little sucker that Sam has. It's super cute. But yeah, that kill scene is really great. And it's like Joe is saying, it goes back to the budget that they were utilizing. I mean, covered in the sheets and the way that it was cut and edited, it leaves a lot to the imagination, but it's still gory in its own right. So I think as graphic as this film can be, I think that well, I don't have kids, but I think that it could be good for a younger audience because it doesn't show
except
a whole
for stuff
bunch.
like this, right?
Well, no,
Really?
but okay, but like, so in terms of the editing, we actually do see the lollipop make contact with her neck, but it cuts away as soon as like he slits it, so you don't actually see the neck get slit. You just see that splash of blood from outside the sheet,
which is
and it's
fun.
a generous amount of blood.
Yeah, he gets that jugular.
Which is good,
that's for
because
sure.
when people get their throats slit, it's a lot of blood. It's not a trickle.
No.
It's connected to an artery. Okay, so what do you think of these animated credits?
Oh,
I
love
always
them.
go back to Tales from the Crypt, but I recognize that obviously there's a longer tradition of like EC before that.
I really liked them. They remind me of like old school horror comics from the 50s, and there was a fun little behind the scenes little tidbit that I saw online that apparently they took drawings from people just on the production. Whoever could draw, they would just contribute to that opening credit. So there wasn't like one particular artist who did all of those drawings. It was very much like a group effort in a way. And even with the opening scenes too of like the kids in various Halloween costumes and stuff, those are pictures from some of the cast and crew from when they were little in Halloween costumes. Which I thought was fun.
That's very cute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think using someone on the production, reusing their talent when you're already paying them for another job, it's a bit of a double dip.
Yeah, I mean, I totally know what you mean. I'm just so used to wearing multiple hats anyways. Like, that's part of the low-budget indie horror scene at the same time, you know?
Like a group effort, right? Everybody pitch in.
And if you're credited, then that
That's
always
fair.
helps.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So after a news story about the Halloween Street Parade, this film is set in Warren Valley, Ohio.
Despite being filmed in where, Joe?
Oh, this is filmed in BC, of course, because tax credits.
What is BC for people who don't know Canada?
Oh, sorry, that's British Columbia. What's the province out west where they film all the CW shows?
Oh my god!
Or the X-Files, or Battlestar Galactica, Trace.
I'm also looking at my Blu-ray of this, and on the back, like under the credits, it says Superman and all related characters and elements are trademarks of and incorporated by DC Comics.
What?
Because I was trying to figure out when my Blu-ray came out because of our discussion from earlier. It was 2009, but there's this whole thing about Superman and DC Comics characters licensing on it.
God. Ugh. Okay.
Yeah.
So we are technically in Warren Valley, Ohio, and we pick up with sisters Lori, played by Anna Paquin, and Danielle, who is played by Lauren Lee Smith, and they are shopping for Disney princess costumes with their friends Janet, Monica Delane, and Maria, Rochelle Aites.
I love all of this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like to say, I prefer this story over this one, because again, they're all interwoven together so well. But think
you like this one?
Yeah, I like this one the most. I think, well, obviously, I like me some bitchy girls, but I also think the payoff for this one is probably my favorite.
It's the most unexpected, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, Lori, Anna Paquin's character, is an obvious nod to Halloween.
I was like, you want to talk Halloween homages?
Yeah.
Like, let's talk about that.
Yeah, like that's pretty straightforward. But I actually love this too. Especially with like the creeps behind the production of this. Like this could have gone really poorly, but through a female lens, I think it still works. Because costumes are so hypersexualized, it's so ridiculous. Like, of course, they're putting on slutty, like, Disney princess clothes, and they do focus, the camera does focus on their bodies, but I think that it's in a way that makes sense for the timeline, and it makes sense for their characters, and they use their bodies later on in the film. It's for their objective.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a way to, like, lure in, as a predatory sense from their perspective. So it works. You know what I mean? Like, it could very much not work, but I think it does.
I agree with that, and I think, because I was actually surprised by, again, like, how little nudity there is in the film, because I think the only breast shots we get are actually in the porno in the beginning, and on one of the girls' mid-werewolf transformation, and it doesn't feel lecherous or creepy at all. It feels more like, again, I don't want to use the word necessary, but it just feels like it fits in organically with what is transpiring on screen.
I think it's primal and like more animalistic and instinctual versus exploitative.
Right.
So I think, it works well.
And I like what you said, Marissa, that the voyeurism, and of course we actually have literal voyeurism in this scene as we've got a creepy perv who's looking at them as they get changed. He is ironically played by Quinn Lord, who is the same actor who plays Sam in the other scenes. So again, a double dip. But I completely agree with you, Marissa. I think so much of the way that we look at these women and a lot of their dialogue, right, about like picking up men and using what you got and that kind of stuff, it's all very much to subvert your expectations so that when we do get the transformation, it hits harder.
Yeah, I do like what they did with that, and it works well. And since Lori, her character, Anna Paquin, is this virginal type character, they want her to lose her virginity, and she's 22 years old, and that kind of stuff happens. If you're 22 years old, like, you're still a virgin, and her older sister's like, come on. That virginity is not exactly what you think it is. Like, her first time is not what you think it is. So I like that aspect of it too.
Yeah.
And also the idea that she was going to lose her virginity to a man dressed in a baby costume.
Oh,
That's just gross.
P.S. though, so did y'all see this bit of trivia where the guy that plays the baby man is actually also the same one who plays the giant baby ghost in the 13 Ghosts remake?
No.
I did see that, yeah.
Oh my god.
Talk about being
typecast
in a really bad way.
Oh.
The pickings for an actor who plays a giant man baby are just really hard. Like, it's a hard market right now.
Oh, wow.
I just imagine him in his baby outfit walking around with like a placard being like, "We'll work for food." Poor man baby.
But that's kind of the great little specks of comedy that come up. She's like, yeah, I have a guy for you. He's cute and he's young, It's like,
I mean, at the end of the day, though, when you know that they're going to murder all of them anyway, it doesn't really matter what they look like unless, like, the age matters.
Right, and I think that's just, it plays into, like, this teasing of, like, what you think is going to happen is not exactly what's going to happen.
Oh, for sure. But I mean, whether you're going to bed with somebody for the first time or whether you're going to eat someone for the first time, they should be young and cute. Come on.
Tasty. Tasteful.
Have standards. Come on, Trace.
He was also passed out drunk, I think. Like, the guy wasn't even, like, coherent.
Oh, no.
So there's that factor, too. But I guess it doesn't matter when you're gonna kill them. I don't know.
So we're cutting back and forth between the girls. So we're getting this kind of backstory as they're coaching Laurie on how to pick up men. And we're also introduced to gluttonous preteen diabetic Charlie, who is played by Brett Kelly. And he is getting a history lesson about Halloween traditions from Stephen Wilkins, played by Dylan Baker.
Okay, so I've never seen Todd Haynes' Happiness, but I did do a look into what it was about, because the only thing I know about it is that Baker plays a pedophile in that movie.
Okay.
Do y'all know what I'm talking about at all?
I haven't seen it.
I know the movie, but I haven't seen it either.
I just think it's interesting that we've got Dylan Baker playing a pedophile in this late 90s movie, and now he's like a child murderer / attempted rapist murderer in this movie.
Yeah.
Sure. He's got a type.
Yeah.
I mean, Baker often plays the villain. And if people listen to our talk at the Nightstream Festival on The Cell, then you'll know that that's one of his rare roles where he's not a completely despicable person.
Yeah, I forgot he was in The Cell.
It's a nothing role, so you're forgiven for...
It's really weird, though, like, when you, like, if you talk to, like, the layman, then you're like, oh, Dylan Baker, it's always like, he played the scientist that was going to become Lizard in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies, but then, like, it didn't happen.
And we're back to the MCU / Sony /
so many connections.
It's a rich tapestry.
Yeah.
Did you have another insight to make apart from the fact that he's just popping up in these grody roles?
Oh, I just like him in this movie.
Okay. He is giving you the appropriate amount of 50s suburban dude where he's like manners, but also murdering people in the basement.
What do we think about this vomit, though? I have to look away every time I watch this scene.
See, I'm not good with watching throw up on screen or vomit on screen, but this one just looks like chocolate water to me, and apparently it was all edible, and the cast would just like snack on it, like
oh no.
Yeah, well, not like regularly, but they could eat it, like it was fine, and they would replay it over and over because it was just hilarious to watch, but it just is so campy, it doesn't bother me. It's like the chunks and the realistic parts, like ugh.
No, it reminds me of that scene in Stand By Me
gross.
when they have, like, they tell the story of the blueberry pie eating contest, and, like, the guy just vomits. Oh, or in Witches of Eastwick when Veronica Cartwright vomits all the cherry pits. This is on par with all that for me, though. I don't care that there's no solids in it. It's gross, and it really, like...
I find it comedic.
It's very comedic. It's just, like, it's just straight water, kind of. It just looks like chocolate water, like... I don't know. I really like the use of blood. If we're talking like bodily fluids and liquids, the use of blood I think is a lot better than the use of vomit in this. Because when we were talking about the opening scene, for example, the blood that they use, like they would heat it up beforehand so it would steam as it was going off of Leslie Bibb. Whatever surface it was on, they were like heating the blood up, and that's like a little...
That's attention to detail.
Yeah, I like that a lot. You know what I mean? Because sometimes blood, the consistency doesn't match the scene. No. Especially with like smaller horror films, like where they're cut or how bad it's cut, but like attention to detail like that, like a cold Halloween night or like autumn Halloween night, I thought was really cool. But yeah, I mean, if you're sensitive to vomit on screen, then you might want to turn away. For me, it wasn't too bad, surprisingly, but it is still gnarly.
I just like it because it clearly conveys that he's obviously sick because of what Principal Wilkins put into this candy, but also because, let's just say, he has been snacking on too much candy, and maybe he has quite a bit of it to vomit out as a result. Can't control his vices.
There's some gallows humor, obviously, peppered throughout this film. And I think this is my favorite use of it in the film, is everything that happens to Wilkins as he's trying to, like, dispose of this body. Like, from dragging him inside and getting, like, the vomit on him, or when he vomits more on him, and he's like, ugh, gross.
Oh my gosh,
And then playing that off as though it's a Halloween costume, which is, of course, what you would expect.
So great.
He ends up having to answer the door, and this is our introduction to Angelic Macy, played by Britt McKillop. I could not figure out what Sarah, the girl with the braces, who is played by Isabel DeLuce, is supposed to be. Do either of you know?
I literally just called her headgear in my notes.
I think she was an alien or something. Didn't she have like a head on top of her?
Oh, maybe that's it.
Yeah,
okay.
I think she had some sort of alien head or spacesuit or something on top of her. It wasn't like over her head like a helmet. It was just on top. I mean, I actually really liked those kids. The main character,
Macy,
yeah. That actress, she was in that show Dead Like Me that I love. So I was really excited to see her in this film too. I don't think she's done too much since, but she plays a really good bitchy little teenager in this movie.
Yeah, she's a proper brat.
Yeah, it's a departure from her Dead Like Me role, because she plays George's younger sister, who's all like depressed the whole show.
Yeah, like Reggie, and she's more docile and stuff, but this one she's very like vindictive and manipulative and rude. So
as always, when characters get the chance to play bad, they embrace it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and she's dressed like an angel, but she's actually a huge bitch. So
of course. And the final member of the trio is Pirate Chip, who is played by Alberto Gizzi. And they're basically there because they want candy, but also because they're looking to collect pumpkins. And this is also our first proper look at Sam. So he ends up following them. And initially, of course, you don't understand who he is. So you think he's just a little kid who's kind of following them around as they trick or treat. This movie loves to subvert your expectations about like who and what is connected.
He also then proceeds to drag his bag down the stairs covered in chocolate puke vomit.
Yeah, it's gross. So he has an open grave, Wilkins does, in the backyard. And as he's about to fill it in, there are other bodies in there because, of course, by this point, is Charlie already dead or is Charlie the one who's grabbing him?
I think Charlie's the one who's grabbing him. Maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, no, that's right, because I think he decapitates Charlie with the shovel.
Right.
And then, yeah, I figured it out.
Hey, did y'all watch the second season of What We Do in the Shadows yet?
No.
Yes.
Okay, there's a whole episode where, like, they've buried too many bodies in the yard and, like, they become sinkholes.
Oh, that's
And I was just thinking about how, like, not sanitary it must be just to keep burying children in your backyard.
Well, no, because Brian Cox's character, Mr. Krieg, actually comments about how it smells like a whorehouse out there.
Oh, yeah. A dead whore. It smells like a dead whore.
I'm sorry, Mr. Craig. How do you know what a dead whore smells like, sir?
Oh, I believe it.
Yeah, so he is interrupted both by Mr. Krieg as well as his young son, Billy, who is played by Connor Levins. And if you do not like children, Billy is fucking annoying.
Yeah, he's terrible. He's the worst. And he makes out of this movie alive, which really upsets me.
I think it works so well, though. It brings some comedy to it, honestly. Like, I think it's hilarious.
It feels almost Looney Tunesy, right? Though, with like, I think there's like two instances where Wilkins is about to like, bash the shovel down, and he gets "Daddy."
Yeah,
and I think it works the perfect number of times. You do it a third time, I think it's too much.
Yeah,
I like it more than the way Dougherty frames it in the basement because I appreciate that we're meant to think that Wilkins hates his son so much that he's willing to kill him, but this part just, I don't know. It's either that it goes on too long or that I just don't believe it. Maybe I did the first time I saw it, but now I'm like, okay, let's just move on.
Right. No, because it's too much misdirection, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's exaggerated, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I do appreciate a good reference to Creepshow by using Charlie's head as the jack-o'-lantern on the plate. But we should also acknowledge that, of course, there is a brief scene where Wilkins, as he's about to go back into the house, he does see Krieg yelling for help at the window, and he just says, "Meh, screw you."
But you do see Sam tackle him, too, which I don't think I've ever noticed before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you're not paying attention, this is where the editing is really good. Because if you're looking, you'll see things, but if you're not, you'll just kind of be like, I don't know why that's significant.
Oh, I guess that's the thing, too, right? Because I guess Sam probably went just from trick-or-treating from Wilkins' house going to Krieg's house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes sense. The timeline of this movie is very fun.
Indeed, yeah. Particularly the first time you see it, where you're just like, oh, wait, they are connected. Oh, wait, they're all happening at the same time. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What fun. Okay, so Charlie is done. Wilkins is seemingly done for now. So we pick back up with the trick-or-treaters. They have an uncomfortable encounter with a drunk Mrs. Henderson who is having a furry sex party? Question mark?
Hey, I thought it was like an orgy, 100%. Marissa, I'm jealous you already brought up the Dead Like Me connection, because literally watching this, I was like, who do I know that woman
yes,
from? What is she?
She was in there too.
She's Dolores Herbig, as in her big brown eyes from Dead Like Me.
So funny.
Listeners, if you haven't seen Brian Fuller's Dead Like Me, please seek it out. It is great.
It's so good.
I've only seen like 2 episodes of it. It's the show of his that didn't capture me in the same way the others did, so I was like, I'll get to it later.
Yeah, well, you can probably find the whole set for cheap, but Rebecca Gayheart is in the first 5 episodes.
Yeah. And there's
really?
only 2
Okay.
seasons, but it's pretty fun.
Yeah, 2 seasons and a movie.
I was going to say, I thought they got a movie. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Back when they were still doing that.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I'm 100% sure it's a little sex party going on there, which is really kind of fun.
I love how she offers them alcohol too. She's like, "It'll be our little secret," and they're like, "No,
She's
that's
wasted.
okay."
Gosh.
Hilarious.
But that, again, if we're talking about Halloween traditions, feels so real, right?
Yeah,
The people on the street who don't have kids,
yeah,
and they're just stuck at home having to give out candy, like, well, maybe I'll just drink this bottle of wine in between trick-or-treaters.
I think that's why, though, if we ever get Trick or Treat 2, which Dougherty has been teasing for a decade,
Yeah.
there's so many more things, like Halloween-type things that you can pull from to make like more anthology stories for this. So that's something that they could add to that, too. Like, I don't know, do something with people giving kids alcohol or something.
I would also love to see the people who make it out of this movie alive come back. Like, how fun would it be to have Mrs. Henderson have her own segment if we get a sequel?
Oh, that'd be great.
Or even, I was imagining that we could get Henry as an angry, vengeful husband/boyfriend going after Sam, like kind of a Loomis character, right?
Well, by the time, if they ever get around to making it, little Billy's probably going to be all grown up, so he can be following his father's footsteps.
This is true, right?
We can get a new actor, too.
Well, and I like how Sam is kind of this character because, Michael Myers is so iconic with the Halloween franchise and just the holiday in general. And so Sam is kind of like this sort of childlike, iconic version for the holiday too in Trick or Treat. He sort of symbolizes the holiday in a lot of ways, but it's through the lens of a child almost. And it's like, he's creepy, but you don't know whether to like run from him or pick him up and give him a hug. He's adorable, but he's also frightening. And I love that. And I think that duality is so great with Halloween in general. It encapsulates the festival or the holiday of Halloween more than Michael Myers, I think. So it's kind of cool that they took that approach to him.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that as well. I actually think it's one of the strongest reasons that this film has longevity and has become a classic. I mean, I think there's a reason that we see Sam paraphernalia. Like, when you see trick-or-treat related items for sale, it's always around Sam. It's not Emma's head as the jack-o'-lantern or Rhonda the savant witch or whatever. It's always Sam because I think people like the idea of this impish trickster who's going out and taking revenge, but he also wears footy pajamas.
Exactly.
It's so adorable.
He is very adorable.
All right, so Macy, Sarah, and Chip end up meeting with Schrader, who is played by Jean-Luc Bilodeau, and he is tasked with recruiting Savant Rhonda, who is played by Sam Todd.
Or as they call her, Rhonda the R-word.
Yeah.
It doesn't ring well, but I do fully believe that children this age would use that word.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Well, and if you think, too, about the fact that we do then have a story about these children encountering special needs children, it plays into the idea that they are brats who don't understand what they're actually addressing. So for them to use the R word makes sense in that regard.
Totally.
Yeah, that's true.
It plays into how actually, like, just their cruelness even more so, and it makes their demise even more like rewarding.
So satisfying.
Yeah.
Oh, these kids are assholes. Like, I mean, Macy's the head asshole, but like they're all assholes.
Yeah.
But there's something satisfying about that too, right? Because this is a film that suggests that it's not adults are the monsters or men are the monsters. It's like everyone has the capacity to end up as a victim of Sam's wrath or of a Samhain curse in some regard. Everyone who doesn't adhere to the traditions and respect their fellow citizens will meet a bad end in this movie. All right. So this is arguably the weirdest part of the film is where we randomly cut to a woman being bitten by a vampire in an alley. She technically has a name, Allie, and she's Allie in an alley.
Oh my gosh.
And she briefly interacts with Henry and Emma. This is really their only other scene where they get to do anything of note, and they dismiss her as a drunk.
And in case you didn't feel bad that Emma dies, she's just like, all right, yeah, bye.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't care about this drunk woman.
I do find that concept very terrifying, though, that he would just lay a body and out in the parade and she could just kind of blend in. That idea of sort of something sinister blending in with something normal, like almost like a Ted Bundy effect, like really, really disturbing and uncomfortable. So I like that scene, actually, the way it ends up.
Actually, Joe, that's a better use of the dead body urban legend than it was in Urban Legend's final cut when they had to go through like the tunnel of love with all the corpses.
Yeah.
This is a way better use of that urban legend.
Yeah, and I think it hits home harder because the film doesn't feel the need to belabor it. We see this vampire, who will eventually be revealed to be Principal Wilkins. He's so comfortable using the anonymity that the costumes provide that he can just hide evidence of a crime. And the film doesn't feel the need to belabor the point by being like, oh my god, isn't it insane? It's like, yeah, here's a brief little moment of terror.
Sure.
And then we're going to cut away and move back to the other story.
Well, I think that's the thing, too. Is I do agree that this particular bit feels out of place as you're watching it, because it feels like the start of a new story, right? Like, oh, we're getting another one. So that, of course, it ends up being a combination of two other stories that we've already seen before works for me.
Yeah, I don't think it's bad. I just think it's the one that, again, on a first-time watch, you think, did we need that? Why is that in there? And, of course, when we see the vampire later, we realize, oh, okay, we're again setting things up. It's all wraparound stuff.
Yeah, and I think it makes the ending that much more satisfying, too, because it's violence towards a female, and then the female gets revenge, in a way, on him later.
Yeah, it's almost kind of like a rape revenge, but it's obvious it's not the rapes getting the revenge, you know?
Oh, but can we say shout out for no rape in this film?
Oh,
Super exciting.
Yeah.
There isn't
very
even really,
exciting.
like, sexual harassment. The girls get objectified, but I wouldn't say that they get harassed by men.
Well, and if they do, we don't see it because they kill them first.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's actually, like, really refreshing, especially with, like, exploitation that could go into horror films and with women in general, like the gratuitous use of breasts, like, yeah, that's actually really nice that there's not any scenes like that in there. But, yeah, I mean, I agree. The pacing in this film is also pretty smooth for the most part, but that scene is a little bit strange, but for me, it kind of works later on.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's 78 minutes. You know, we got to move.
Yeah, and it's a lot. Like, a lot happens. Like, to even have that little tidbit in there, it doesn't have to be in there, and it kind of speaks to, like, the writing and the storyline, you know? It's very intricate.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we catch back up with the kids as they're wheeling their 8 pumpkins to the rock quarry, and this is the site, we are told, of the Halloween school bus massacre. So we actually get a little flashback with a story recounted by Macy of the 8 special needs children who, at the behest of their parents, were accidentally, in quotation marks, drowned by their bus driver when the bus goes over the cliff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much more to say about this because, I mean, obviously the bus driver will come back into play later for, like, kind of an 11th hour reveal, but I think it's fun. I like the color palette change during this scene because it looks very fall, you know?
Slightly desaturated.
I think this is where the cinematographer, Glenn McPherson, really shines because, like you're saying, Trace, the color palette, there's all these warm, like, reds and oranges and yellows, and it looks very vintage, and it's actually a really beautiful flashback story and super disturbing. Like, the costumes that the kids have are based on, like, old school Halloween costumes that were always kind of strange, and apparently the kids playing these roles really did have some sort of physical disability or mental disability, so I found that kind of interesting. They contributed to the designs of those costumes, I think, too, so that was kind of interesting behind the scenes little tidbit that I've read. But also the special effects, when the bus goes over the cliff, they actually do that, and then they use a miniature when it goes down into the water. So there's very limited CGI in this film, which is something to just further appreciate too.
That's probably why too it had a following too, at least with horror fans, because we can recognize that and see it.
Yeah, appreciate the special effects. I do really love that shot, though, where the bus goes over the edge.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a ton of really showy camera work in this. I would actually argue the film is more effective in its editing, but this is a nice moment where you're like, oh, okay, wow, I'm taking note of this, so that was a strong choice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Trace will save the reveal of the driver, but we are told that he is never heard from again. I do like that that's almost a quick little standalone vignette. Like, you could almost see that as a short that originated before this began, and yet it's not.
And it's fun to have an introduction to kind of like a lore character, you know, if you grow up in a specific, especially like a small town, you know, there's always this legend or this person that was never found again, or this crazy person who lives in this creepy haunted house, or you think is haunted, you know, so it fits the timeline with these kids and being that age group 100%.
Yeah, and Trace, you actually mentioned during the vomit scene that reminded you of Stand By Me, and I get strong Stephen King vibes from this particular backstory. It feels very like, are we in Castle Rock right now?
See, and I was thinking about Nightmare on Elm Street 2, just because of the bus.
Yeah. Isn't it funny that we think of a school bus in a horror film, and it's like, Nightmare
on Elm Street 2!
I see you!
It's gay!
Gay. All right, so we'll hop back to Laurie for a moment. She's wandering around the street parade silently, looking for her match. So this is kind of a slow motion, mostly atmospheric bit. And then she sits down and she chats with Danielle by phone. This is where we get the ha-ha reveal that Danielle has found her fat baby. And we also see that the vampire is still on the hunt, and he is pausing to consider her. I do also want to give a quick shout out to Lauren Lee Smith's line delivery in this. The date that she has picked up from the costume shop comes up behind her, and she's like, "Not now, Andrew." And he goes, "Josh." And she's like, "Whatever."
It's amazing. Yeah, I think like the role reversals, the stereotypical role reversals of men and women and their sort of approach to finding a partner is really great in this film. And I like how Laurie is dressed as Little Red Riding Hood, and she's kind of like on the prowl for a guy, as opposed to looking around like being scared so much.
It's all a bit on the nose given the final reveal, but I do like it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I don't mind it at all for all of those reasons, even though I could easily see people, like, I worry that if this film came out in the last couple of years as opposed to more than a decade ago, people would look at it and be like, the symbolism is a little on the nose. It's like just a touch obvious.
Yeah. But it goes back to it being a fun movie, you know? Like, this is one of those films that, like, you can read into it a little bit if you want, but at the end of the day, like, this is just a fun horror comedy film, you know?
Yes, you're absolutely right. And the horror and the comedy blend very, very well together. So these bitchy line readings work well with what we're about to get to, which is what happens to Rhonda at the lake.
Okay, so I think this is probably my least favorite story out of all of them, so I kind of like that it falls in the middle. I like what happens. It goes on a little too long for me, but I think my favorite bit, like from a technical standpoint, is when Rhonda and Pirate Boy
Chip
going down the elevator, and you just see like the 3 jack-o'-lanterns to mark the other 3 kids.
Yeah.
And they're moving and they start slowly going out. I thought that was actually a really cool way to like show that.
I agree. I do think it goes on for a touch long, and maybe that's also because we're fans of the Laurie werewolf storyline, and it does feel like that gets the least amount of screen time compared to this one and Krieg.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
But all this to say, so as they're going down this elevator, Rhonda and Chip hear the screams of the others, and he has a bit of a panic attack, so she goes on by herself. She's attacked by watery zombies. She loses her glasses. She passes out in a shallow pond, and of course, this is all a Halloween prank.
I would murder these kids. Like, I'm not a prankster. I've never cared for practical jokes. And they try to make Schrader like make up for it by like actually showing that he cares about her, but no.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. These people suck.
Yeah.
I love that for Schrader, though. Like, the other ones are easy to dislike, but I love that Schrader tries to make amends and still meets the same fate.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He at least has like a mini arc, like a little bit of a heart at the end, but Yeah, I mean, I do like how her character is dressed as a witch, and, you know, we haven't really had that sort of symbolism in this film that's associated to Halloween just yet. So that's kind of fun, but then at the same time, it is interesting that she's an idiot savant. Like, I feel like that's not really mentioned in a lot of films anymore. Like, Rain Man is so definitive of what an idiot savant looks like and what those characters can be. But I kind of liked that sort of representation in the film because you don't usually see that so often. Like, those kids could have made fun of her for anything.
I mean, I think it's an easy trap that you could fall into. Like, I mean, like, what's something we saw recently? Oh, like the Predator movie where it's like, oh, like magical autism child, you know?
Oh, I was thinking of Thomas Jane's character, but
no.
yes.
But that's also kind of close. No. But like where they give you like an autistic kid and it's like, oh, that kid is like, oh, he's special. He has special powers. He can read alien languages.
But
Which movie is this?
the new Predator film.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
I love that that's your go-to.
Well, I mean, again, we can also look at Mercury Rising with Bruce Willis, where the autistic kid, you know, cracks a government code.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that movie. Yeah.
I mean, I was going to go with Cube, but sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Sure. Anyway, there's a bunch of examples of this. And this one doesn't, Trick or Treat kind of avoids it. I mean, she is like an expert on Halloween, but it's not like...
Is that really an idiot savant? She makes a lot of jack-o'-lanterns, though, and then she,
Yeah.
like, knows a lot about the holidays, so maybe that... I don't really know.
I don't
think
know.
it's more
She
just
could
that the
just be
kids are
eccentric.
shits.
Yeah.
I think she's just a little bit weird.
Yeah.
And she has a sing-song voice, and these kids, these bitchy kids, have decided, oh, she's different.
Yeah.
Therefore, let's teach her a lesson.
Yeah.
Well, you notice too, Macy gets jealous whenever Schrader is like helping her because like
Yeah.
Rhonda like rests her head in his shoulders, and
Oh,
the camera
yeah.
cuts back to her.
Macy has full-on, like, death stares at get your hands off my man.
Yeah.
It's another like, I mean, it's another reference for me, but she just reminds me so much of Chris Hargison from Carrie.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This all feels quite indebted to Carrie,
For
right?
sure.
Like,
Mhm.
the kind of naive child who gets taken for a ride by people who just want to pull a prank on
And,
her.
like, the
Yeah.
nice guy who is sort of in on it, but, like, feels bad afterwards, like the
Right.
Tommy character. Yeah.
Aw, I like Tommy.
I mean, yes, but like, you know, initially he didn't want to take Carrie to the prom, so
Yeah.
we had to force him to. But then he changed his mind.
Yeah.
Right.
But no, that's a good point. That is very, like, Carrie-esque for sure. And Macy, that actress, I can sympathize. She has some gnarly resting bitch face.
Yeah.
She sure does.
So, like, I get it, but, like, yeah, she can throw some, like, really intense looks, that's for sure.
And a good example of the brutality without seeing it, though, I do love that Headgear gets, like, dragged away by the chains that she's wearing.
Yes.
Oof.
And you know what
Yeah.
that reminded me of was very similar to Krampus, the scene in Krampus where they get dragged under the snow. So I think that, like, those effects are kind of similar in another movie
Dougherty directed.
did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Krampus feels like it's trying to capture the lightning in a bottle that is Trick or Treat, and it's not quite hitting the mark.
I agree. I know that you're less enthused with that film as I am, Joe, but I am excited to revisit it with you one day because while I do agree it doesn't capture the same magic that this film has, because I too was let down on a first time viewing with that film, but on a rewatch, I've since grown to appreciate Krampus a lot more.
Yeah,
Right.
I actually
Yeah.
really like that film in a lot of ways, and there's some really good technical aspects in there, but and I could see that sort of reimagined in watching some of the effects in this film too.
I think it's
Yeah.
because probably though the script doesn't feel quite as clever as this one. I think that's probably the issue. Like it's more of a straightforward tale, you know?
Right. And let's not forget, we swap out practical for CGI.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
There is practical in that movie, but yes, like the gingerbread, the CGI
gingerbread
stuff.
man,
Yeah.
doesn't
those are
look
pretty
great.
It's
bad.
a little unforgivable.
But like the giant Jack in the Box monster that eats the kid, like that's practical and that looks
Yeah.
great.
This
And
is
I
true.
think there's
Yeah.
like some good heart in both of these films. I think that like he brings some emotional aspects out adjacent to these holidays and these times that make it so nostalgic for everyone and make it to where, you know, you want to celebrate these holidays over and over again every single year. So I think he taps into those emotions pretty well, given that these are horror/comedy films.
Yeah.
They do
Yeah.
have a pulse, which is something I really appreciate.
They do. Yeah, and I think that's another contributing factor to why people like to revisit these films at particular times of the year, right? Trick or Treat is capturing something so perfectly about the spirit of the holiday or the celebration that makes it seem like, well, I can't let this season go by without watching this because it's just ingrained into the culture. This film is so good at capturing what I want to evoke from the season, and therefore I must watch it.
No, I mean, my Christmas double feature is Krampus and Love Actually.
Aww.
Well, we all know what the real horror film in that combo is.
Fuck you. I love how Love Actually went from, like, this, like, period of, like, oh, everyone loves it, and now, like, everyone hates it. Like, that is some revisionist history that I just, like, will not abide by.
I watched it last year with my mom, and I was like, this movie is toxic. Toxic.
I never got into it.
But I still love it.
It's sweet, and I still love a whole bunch of it, but I'm also like, this movie's kind of garbage.
Okay, wait. Marissa, you don't like romantic comedy, so you don't have a say in this matter.
I do have a say. There are a couple that I do like. I love Harold and Maude. I love Long Shot. And I like Never Been Kissed. And that's, you know.
Oh, wow. Talking about problematic rom-coms, Marissa.
But I also love Never Been Kissed.
Oh,
like,
God, but how can you not? But you're like, Michael Vartan, please take 10 steps away from that teenage girl.
I mean, it's very, very problematic, but I just think it's so fun. Like, I just think it's a fun movie. Like, Josie's character is really fun.
No,
it is.
Drew Barrymore's charisma like makes that movie.
I
work,
love
honestly.
Drew Barrymore, but I mean, I think Harold and Maude is probably my favorite rom-com, and then I did love Long Shot.
Yeah,
Long Shot was good.
I was pleasantly surprised, you know.
Yeah, it was a good, like, 2019, 2020. Like, Marissa found a rom-com she liked and a comic book movie that she liked.
Oh my God. Yeah, it was a different year. And I was covering that for BMD at, what was it, South by last year. And I was like, oh shit, I have to cover Long Shot. And I was like, this is so much fun. And then, like, Boys to Men came out on stage and Charlize Theron was just, like, wasted. It was so fun. It was so great. Yeah. Love it. Watch it. Great.
Yeah. That movie only works for me because of Charlie's.
I agree. I would agree. But I rewatched it a couple months ago and it actually held up really, really well.
Yeah.
Oh, it's smart. I'm disappointed it didn't do better.
Yeah, for sure.
And that is our sidebar. Good chat, everyone. So, all this to say, Rhonda gets the upper hand. She ends up locking them out of the elevator. They get eaten and or murdered by the real zombified children, and she rides to safety. And she just has this awesome bitch walk moment where she's got her single pumpkin still lit in her wheelbarrow. She locks eyes with Sam. Lord knows what he's off to do. I guess this is probably the end of his night, so maybe he's about to retire to whatever pumpkins do.
Well, no, because the way the film ends, he actually hasn't gone to kill Emma yet.
Is this earlier?
Yeah, it's earlier. Because we see Rhonda walking down the street and Sam sees her, yeah.
This is, okay.
Yeah, so we don't really know why he's out here yet.
Wait for the sequel, kids.
Yeah.
Alright, so let's hop back to Lori and finish up her story. So she is being followed and eventually attacked by the vampire in the woods, and her screams are heard by Danielle and Janet, who are worried that she hasn't appeared yet, and then all of a sudden, a body drops out of the sky among these party revelers at Sheep's Meadow.
Question.
That was your IMDb trivia.
What are the logistics of how she gets this body up in a tree, wrapped in her hooded cloak thing, and then drops it, but then proceeds to walk in from, like, the ground level?
I assume she threw the body.
Yeah, I think she threw him.
I thought she, like, dropped him from a tree.
I mean, she could have, but yeah.
I guess she could, yeah.
Well, she had a winch hidden off to the side, and she hooked him up.
And then she, like, takes her pigtails out and walks in with her hair all perfect, you know? Like, makes her grand entrance.
Oh, yeah. Hair and makeup. I love how she casually tells them that he bit her, and she looks supermodel gorgeous with the hair and the makeup. And just thinking, oh, okay, I guess he bit you.
Yeah, and there's just blood all down her neck, so I mean, it wasn't like a fatal bite at all.
It's not normal blood, it's sexy blood.
It's sexy blood, in her sexy, like, princess outfit,
A sexy Quint from Sexy Jaws fighting sexy sharks.
Exactly. You could imagine, actually, that Henry would have filmed this and maybe wanked to it as part of his nature porno video collection. So the body in question, of course, belongs to the vampire, who is quickly unmasked as Principal Wilkins. And he looks around, he sees that he is surrounded by the bodies of dead men. And cue your Marilyn Manson Sweet Dream song.
Gosh.
I
Great.
So, okay, when I hear this song, I think about either this movie or House of Haunted Hill, the remake.
Yes.
And I think it's probably put to better use in this film because, y'all, these werewolf transformations. I mean, again, bear in mind, this was set to come out, well, I was going to say it 2 years after Curse, but Curse was supposed to come out in 2003. So,
maybe it got delayed because of werewolfism.
Maybe.
Anything to do with werewolves has a bad track record.
Actually, I'm going to do a shout out to Fantastic Fest this year. They had some really solid werewolf programming.
I've heard that.
They had some good werewolf films. But anyways, yes, the transformations, Trace, they are fantastic.
It's just their skin being ripped off.
Yes.
I mean, again, I am sure this has been done before in a werewolf movie. I'm not a werewolf movie connoisseur, unfortunately, but it looks great, and it's gooey, and it's gross. There's a part where, they rip the arm sleeve off, and it's just ooh, it's so good.
It's like degloving.
Yes!
It is.
Yeah.
Flanagan, you owe us money.
Yes, like that Gerald's Game scene. And the Foley in it, the sound effects and the Foley are just top notch. So good. So fun.
It's like a wet splat.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what makes it work. And there's a cutaway shot where it just shows almost like a whole skin suit. Actually very Hellraiser-y too, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
I can see that.
But then the actual wolf itself, I think the only CGI we get in this scene is Anna Paquin's back when her spine starts working up, and I think maybe some of her facial features.
I think it all looks good though.
Yeah.
It does look good, but the wolf itself, which I think is supposed to be her sister when it comes up, it looks fantastic. And there's the close-ups of the eyes of the wolves. I mean, it's great.
I think that's some puppetry work going on.
It
Yes.
is.
Yeah, it looks really, really good. It's so fun.
I've actually seen people reference this as their favorite werewolf movie because this transformation sequence is so captivating.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I think because we have a dearth of, unfortunately, werewolf movies.
But I also think it's because, though, it's a surprise werewolf movie. If you're just watching this movie, you do not know going into it that you're getting a werewolf movie. So I think, imagine if you were watching a movie and it was a surprise aquatic horror, you know?
Right.
Oh my gosh. Would you love it? You'd freak out.
I would shit myself in the theater.
Oh my god, I can't wait. It's such a fun reveal too, and it's a great twist. It works so well on so many different levels.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And of course, to cap the sequence off, we finish with Sam sitting on a log just watching the wolves feast over a blood moon.
Yep.
He's cute. So now we have possibly the most awkward transition in the film where we just cut to a comic image that says earlier. And we are back on our suburban street and we see trick-or-treaters are being scared out of their candy by Mr. Krieg's dog, Spite.
Spite? I think I thought it was Spike, but I honestly could be totally wrong.
Oh, I watched it with subtitles. It's definitely Spike. Which makes sense given Mr. Krieg's character.
Yeah. I was about to say there's not much to this scene plot-wise, but there is a lot to this scene just from, a stunt perspective.
Yeah, this is properly the climax of the film because it's the most action that we're going to get. I don't know why I said it that way. Action. But I will confess that for me, this is the weakest part of the film. Even though I love Brian Cox and I love the fact that it's most of Sam, this is the most that we'll get of Sam and the mythology behind the character. I think, again, it plays out a little bit too long. It feels back heavy to me. Feel free to disagree.
No, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree that it feels a little too long. I think, though, describing it as the climax of the film, it feels appropriate because not that there's been a ton of build-up up until this, because, again, we've been getting a bunch of climaxes from all the installments.
Right.
But it feels so batshit insane.
Yeah.
And the moment when he says, which, I know is a thing, homage, but the moment when he says, you gotta be fucking kidding me, it's just such, a good audience moment where it's just, I can imagine seeing this in a theater and, especially if it was a festival, and, having the audience go nuts during this entire sequence.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and I think it's fun, too, because there's a showdown, and you don't really have a showdown yet. You just have,
it's more like shock reveals.
Right, shock reveals, and then there's, a victim in some form or another. This is, a fight sequence. like they go at it, and you have this huge character reveal with Sam, which is I love it.
It's
like
amazing.
Pumpkin thing.
Oh my gosh, it's just such a great creature.
Mm-hmm.
It's just fantastic. There's so many different references in this scene too, like, you know, the little candy, the red ball, the candy jawbreaker that bounces down the stairs.
Trace won't get that. He hasn't seen it.
The changeling? Really?
Oh yeah, no, I've never seen it.
Oh, it's so good. It's so
I've heard it's really good.
great.
It's a ghost story, right?
Yes,
It is, yeah.
It's really, really great. You should totally watch it.
Add it to the list, Joe. We'll cover it one day.
Oh yeah,
It's Canadian.
it's so good. It's so good. But it's more of like a haunted house film, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's a throwback to that. And then, you know, like the severed hand, I thought that could either be like Evil Dead or maybe even like Addams Family style. It's campy, it's fun, it's creepy, it's violent. It's like everything you kind of want all in one.
It's true.
My favorite visual gag actually in this sequence is whenever he finally shoots Sam with the shotgun.
Say it 5 times fast. Say it 5 times fast.
But there's that shot of like where Sam is like sliding down the hallway and just like hits the wall.
Yes.
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 The lack of sound effects too, right?
Oh,
Like
that's
there's
true.
nothing on the soundtrack. There's no score. It's just like
Yeah.
It's so good. I do wonder though if the lack of plot is maybe what you're feeling, Joe, because like I said, this is just like a 15 to 20 minute fight scene, and I can see how for someone that might be a bit much when there's not really any other drive. I do wonder maybe if they had revealed that he was the bus driver beforehand, even though I think it's pretty obvious by this point. Like, I think if you're following the film and you can see how it's kind of putting the pieces together, I think that it's easy to predict that this is how he plays into the film.
So I was such a dum-dum on a first viewing of this film that I completely forgot that we didn't know who the bus driver was, and it was out of sight, out of mind until we see him burning those photos, and then we actually see the picture of him with the kids in the fireplace, and I was like, all right.
I don't think that makes you a dum-dum. I think this just speaks to, like, there's a lot going on in this film, you know? Like, there are multiple different storylines. There's lots of different scenes in the middle. You know, I can see how you would need, like, a little refresher. Someone might need, like, a little refresher. You know what I mean?
Well, because even when he goes out into the yard, because he hears a sound, right? And then he goes out into the yard, and you're like, oh, right, yes, he had that interaction with Wilkins earlier, so we get to see that repeat. And it's so easy to have forgotten about it because it feels like, oh, well, this isn't that story. We've already seen that story. That was an hour ago. But I think, again, because of the way that Trick or Treat is structured, it pays that off. And I think it rewards multiple viewings because then you're looking for those connections and realizing that we're playing with time at the same time.
Well, yeah, and I love movies like that, honestly, that sort of warrant another viewing, like Us. If you watch that film, Jordan Peele's Us, a second time around, it's almost a completely different film because you're viewing
I
it
can imagine.
differently. And then same with,
yeah.
like, Hereditary. There's so many little things that Ari Aster, little hints of, you know, foreshadowing that he put in there that you may not have caught the first time. And Trick or Treat is one of those films where it sort of begs you to watch it again, and there's subtle things you might miss, you know?
Yeah.
One of my favorite parts of that final scene, like what Trace was talking about, when he gets shot, it's not blood that's shooting on the walls. It's like pumpkin seeds and the
pumpkin
inside
guts.
of pumpkin guts. And I love that. It's just so fun.
And the face design on Sam is just
it's creepy.
Creepy as hell, yeah.
Yeah.
It's part of the shared Pumpkinhead verse.
Yes. I just think it's so perfect. He's so creepy. And even when, like, he just sort of stands there and tilts his head like Michael Myers does, like, that was a nod to Halloween, too.
The shot of him crawling on the ceiling, too, as Wilkins as Krieg is at the door.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
That's actually very easy to miss on a first-time watch as well.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think it's a fun scene. I can see why it's your least favorite, Joe. I think it's just too much fun for me, which is why, like, even though I think the school bus massacre, like, zombie kid stuff held more narrative weight, it's not quite as compelling as this fight scene is for me.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that one's more of a slow burn. This one's more of a traditional... Marissa, you said it's like almost like a battle sequence, right?
Yeah.
Well, and they actually used, like, a 9-year-old stunt double and then a little person stunt double, I think, as well. And I was thinking, like, damn, that'd be so fun as a kid to be a stunt double in movies. That sounds like a really fun gig, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But another funny behind-the-scenes little tidbit I found about that last scene was that they put a wig on him, that gray wig with the long hair, as a kind of reference to John Carpenter, but it totally fell flat and no one really got it. He just looks very disheveled.
Yeah, I saw that John Carpenter reference and I was like, who was doing the makeup and costumes and hair in this movie?
Yeah, it definitely fell
and
short.
also rude.
I know. So
No,
funny.
guys, this is John Carpenter. It's like a homage, and everybody's thinking, this person looks like a hobo.
I know. It's like, of all the, references and like tributes you can do, like throw up a movie poster on the wall or something. Like,
right.
That's kind of a weird one, but yeah, it totally falls short. It's still a fun scene, and like how he pulls out the candy bar with the razor blade in there to stab him, trying to figure out candy to use in the film without any sort of like big labels, coming up with their own candy.
Oh, I bet they couldn't use any labels.
No.
I bet no candy company would let them do that.
No, so if you look at
Or
the
they couldn't afford
candy,
it.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like you can't have name brand candies, so they invented like a couple of different candy companies to put wrappers in close-up shots, and then they just had like generic unwrapped candy for like other scenes where it would just fall in bulk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think they named the named candy bars are after people on the production crew.
Oh, really? That's cool. I like that. Those are fun little things I like production.
Yeah. I think the final homage that we haven't mentioned is the Achilles slash, which a lot of people attribute to Pet Sematary and Gage.
Yeah. Those always get me.
I love a good Achilles.
Ugh, it's so gnarly. It gets me every time.
Trace, do you like this one better, or do you like the one in Urban Legend that we talked about on Patreon?
I love this one because I like it when you can see the. Honestly, we're talking best Achilles tendon slices. It's gonna be Hostile. Like that's the best one.
Okay.
But
fair.
this is still good.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have Brian Cox saying "the weekend."
That's true.
But we'll make do.
It's the weekend, Reese.
Terrible. So, I mean, I don't know. Is there anything else we want to talk about? We've covered all the kind of ups and downs. I do like the part where Brian Cox ends up getting his hands cut on all the broken glass, and then he can't open his multiple locks because he's a paranoid weirdo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's much left here to discuss. And honestly, that's kind of the end because we just get like last little shots of everyone. We get to see Wilkins' son waiting on the doorstep. Rhonda's walking around with her wagon. The werewolf girls are driving and almost hit Rhonda.
Yeah.
Yes. Girls, come on.
But then we wind up right back where we started with Sam looking at... Well, he looks at Rhonda, then he's looking at Emma coming home to blow out that jack-o'-lantern.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also the special needs kids have to show back up at Krieg's door so that they can exact their revenge.
Right. And I do like that. I love the cutaway to the comic book. It calls to mind Tales from the Crypt for me, even though I'm sure it has been a thing before.
Mm-hmm.
It actually reminded me of... Because as a kid, I never watched Tales from the Crypt, but I did watch the... the animated series. I think it was called Tales from the Crypt Keeper.
Oh, yeah.
But they used the same thing where, like, the end of the episode would cut back to the comic book. It was just really scary to me as a kid.
It's funny, right? Because it still has a certain power. Like, there's something about watching live action transform into animation. Because I'm thinking back to even Brandon Max of Violence, the Jay Baruchel film that we did on Patreon.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked that element. And I remember us talking about how we wish that there was more of it.
Yeah. And they do it a little bit in this. It's still not a lot, but I think enough to where it, like, gets the point across.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just like how they also ended on that final scene was with the older man who, like, it's very much that point in your life where you become old and grumpy. You close your doors on Halloween and you turn off your lights, because you have these different stages of the film that you go through, like being a kid and being with your dad on Halloween and making a jack-o'-lantern, or, being in your 20s and going out and, like, hooking up at parties for Halloween and, being a teenager, and then you have this, like, older self that's, like, over the holiday and doesn't want anything to do with it, and I just really like how they sort of did the climax on that part of it. But, another thing, I really didn't appreciate the music of this film until, like, I rewatched it recently, and I really like it. Douglas Pipes is the composer, and he also did Monster House and also Krampus. Yeah. And Waxwork Records put out a really beautiful LP of it a couple of years ago, but the score is actually really awesome. It's super creepy at times, really whimsical at times. That action scene, like, I don't think there's any score playing during that, but leading up to it is really fun. Like, I think that it covers a lot of really good aspects of whimsical and playful horror.
Mm-hmm. His Krampus score is the same way, because I 100% bought that the second I saw the movie in theaters.
Oh yeah, it's so fun. He's great. And I don't think he's done a whole bunch of movies, but I would love to see him do more horror scores.
I mean, I don't think Dougherty brought him back for Godzilla King of the Monsters, which is a shame, but oh well.
I don't know. I mean, maybe he just doesn't do those kinds of scores, you know? I mean...
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the films that you've described, the three of those are all pretty firmly in, like, a horror comedy wheelhouse, right? So I wonder if his scores lend themselves better to that, but...
Sure.
It's funny because it almost sounds like, oh, he might be a good match for, like, a Tim Burton kind of film, or maybe a Tim Burton of old film.
Right.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head there.
Yeah, or even like you know, the new Witches movie with Robert Zemeckis. You know, he has Silvestri is coming back for that. You know, he's a composer doing the film for that, which it works. But I could very easily see maybe Pipes doing the Witches remake.
Mm-hmm. Right. Which, strangely enough, is coming out this week.
That's correct.
Yeah, gosh, I need to get caught up on all the releases and everything, but...
Oh, Marissa, no. Just let it go. You literally cannot. Nope. You will drown in October releases. Oh my gosh,
that's true. That's very true. But yeah, the music is fantastic and super fun, and that's a composer, I think, to kind of, like, keep your eye on.
Well, that's good. Well, I mean, yeah, and that kind of wraps it up. Joe, we did talk about it, I think, probably throughout the episode, but I know, like, is there anything more you wanted to say about the anthology setup and how it kind of, like, is the pinnacle of anthologies for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons that people like this film is that it confirms that anthology films can be done in a certain way that is more satisfying. Because I think, Marissa, you mentioned off the top that you're not a big fan. And to be honest, neither am I.
Same.
And one of the reasons is because it feels like whenever you go into it, you're inevitably going to be disappointed in one of the stories.
Well, they also feel like, I mean, like, if you've ever been to a film festival and, like, there's, like, a short segment, you go see a bunch of shorts instead of a feature film, like, it just feels kind of like that, you know?
Yes.
The strength of Trick or Treat is because they're so meshed together. It doesn't feel like one ends and then you have to start from the beginning again. Like, you're already invested in these, so you don't have to pick up the steam. And maybe that's another reason why I don't love this final story with Krieg, is because it does feel like a soft reboot. Like, we've seen him a little bit, but we really have to start back from the beginning of the night. Like, literally, it says earlier.
Right.
But even that, like, it's a quibble, not a real complaint, because I think this film is so well engineered and the stories are so well intermingled that it feels very satisfying, and there's just such a fun vibe to all of the stories. Like, they don't feel like they're struggling with disparate tones like you sometimes get with anthologies that have different directors even.
That's true.
That was a lot. I apologize.
No, it wasn't a word vomit. Like, it makes sense, and I can't really add anything else to that because I think you're right. And I think that's part of the reason why this film works so well. Not because you're right, but because of everything you said.
Oh no, it works because I'm right.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I agree 100%. I'm right there with you. And you know, it's not even one of those movies where I'm like, oh, it's such a great anthology movie. Like, it's a great movie.
Right. There's no concession.
Yeah,
right.
It's a great film, great holiday movie, great Halloween movie, great anthology movie. Like, yeah, it's so fun.
Ticking all those boxes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all right. Glad we're all in agreement. It's always nice when we all like a film. Well, I think that'll kind of wrap up the film. So before we announce what we're covering next week, Marissa, is there anything you'd like to plug or tell us about?
Yeah, so right now I just have a podcast that I'm currently working on through a website called Downright Creepy, and it's me and 3 other girls who talk about, the supernatural, paranormal, cryptids, true crime, horror films, serial killers, all that good stuff. It's called Black Magic Coven, and you can find us on anywhere you can really stream podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other than that, just continuing writing and covering films. Primarily, I've been writing lately for Slash Film, and you can check out my work. I post on Twitter, so you can follow me at Marisa_Mirabal.
Nice.
And I will go to bat, too, for the podcast. I've listened to your first 2 episodes so far. I think as of this recording, y'all have had 4 come out?
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, your intro episode is one like ours where it's like kind of like getting to know all of y'all and like y'all's connections to horror and everything. And the second one, though, is the cannibal murder thing.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's a really... Joe, this is why I brought up that movie Grim Love to you a little while ago, because Marissa was watching it for this episode of her podcast.
Okay.
But it's really fun to hear 4 women talk about a man who ate a man's penis. Or, I'm sorry, a man who paid a man to eat his penis.
Oh, yeah. It was
get the logistics
consensual.
right.
It was consensual and everything. So, yeah, we talk about some fun stuff. We did another episode on the Cecil Hotel and then Lavinia Fisher, which is the first female serial killer. And we have a cryptid episode coming out soon. So lots of different spooky topics. It's a good time. Yeah.
So yeah,
fun.
everyone make sure y'all check that out, please. It's really good fun. And if you want to get in touch with us, you can reach us on Twitter and Instagram at Horror Queers and join our Horror Queers Facebook group to hang out with other listeners. If you have a moment, please rate and review us on your podcatcher of choice, although Apple Podcasts is always the best option for that. If you would like HQ merchandise, please check out our store at TeePublic. Just search for Horror Queers on teepublic.com. And if you want even more Horror Queers content, please support the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/horrorqueers. We're reaching the end of October, but we've already released episodes on Ratched, Books of Blood, and The Haunting of Bly Manor. And actually, in the next couple days, we'll have an episode on Ben Wheatley's readaptation of Rebecca.
Yep.
Next week, we will release our audio commentary on Halloween H2O just in time for Halloween, or Samhain, whatever you'd like to call this holiday/celebration.
Sure. Since we can't seem to decide.
But Joe, I thought we were really getting into the Halloween spirit with this week's episode, but I think next week might be an even more popular Halloween choice. What is it?
This is true, yeah. So as we barrel our way towards 100 episodes, Trace, we are going to wrap up October and our special Halloween episode. This is actually kind of fun because at this time last year, former guest on the show, Ariel Fisher, and I went on Entertainment Tonight Canada to do a live debate about the best Halloween film. And I went on defense for Trick or Treat, and Ariel went to bat for Hocus Pocus.
I love that neither one of y'all went for Halloween.
We were politely asked not to.
That's great. Oh man, I've seen Hocus Pocus countless times. It is probably the one film that would qualify as my gateway horror, because if you're a kid watching this movie, Billy the Zombie is fucking terrifying. And I mean, there's arguably a bit of queer content in there because I think it's been really influential on drag culture.
Yeah, just a touch. And also, the director's a big old homo.
He is a big old homo. He would go on to direct what? I think some High School Musical movies.
Just a few.
So everyone, tune in next week for our special episode on Hocus Pocus. Hopefully that will tide y'all over until your COVID Halloween.
Ooh.
Marissa, thank you again for joining us this week to discuss Trick or Treat.
Thank y'all so much for having me. This was a blast.
Thanks, Marissa.
Yeah. And on that note, we can cross out Trick or Treat.
Yes, and cross out Horror Queers.
You've made it to the end of another bloody, disgusting podcast. Congratulations. If you like our programming, consider searching for other bloody, disgusting podcasts, such as Creepy, Horror Queers, The Boo Crew, SCP Archives, Nightlight, Margaret's Garden, Nightmare on Film Street, and more.
Hello, I'm Shelby Scott, the host of Scare You to Sleep, a podcast where I tell you spooky bedtime stories full of creepy sound effects and music that is soothing yet unsettling to help immerse you into a world of horror. This is a show for those of us who have realized horror can be a strange but relaxing escape from reality. Speaking of escapes, sometimes I lead you through guided nightmares, like a guided meditation, but instead of flowery meadows, I take you on a journey through your own personal nightmare. So come get lost in the terror with me. Listen to Scare You to Sleep wherever you listen to podcasts, or find us online at bloody.fm. Sweet screams.